So we are staying with our BRICS coverage. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, on the 22nd to the 24th of August is when things will be occurring. It is the 15th edition. So far, we've heard about the state of readiness as we prepare closer to those dates. We're seeing the delegates at the South African BRICS Business Council in Johannesburg spoken about Africa and perhaps how it needs to take a united approach in global trade matters. Lots on the agenda, perhaps as we edge closer to those dates. Frances Hurd is on standby. Let's cross live to her.
Thank you. I can barely hear studio, but I can tell you that we are still where the action is happening today, and that's the BRICS Trade Fair here at Gallagher Estate. I've seen wonderful jewelry and clothes. Batu, the South African, very colourful shoemakers are here. So people are showing their wares, and the BRICS Business Council, which has been operational in South Africa for years, bringing together different industry experts, is holding a number of discussions. So you'll hear some announcements. Hopefully that will stop shortly. But one of the things discussed today, crucial, is energy. And we are joined by one of the panel members, who is Alex Mabunda from NTIYISO Consulting Group that consults around infrastructure and energy issues. Mr. Mabunda, thank you for being with us. Apologies about the announcement behind us. The viewers can still hear us well. I'm sure Eskom loomed large over any discussion of energy, the unbundling. I mean, was there a discussion of where it's going, what it means for South Africans at the end of it?
Yes, the Minister of Energy was here as well among the panelists, and he addressed some issues on the policy side. And yes, the issue of Eskom did come in. Certainly on the transmission side, we are aware that some of the challenges we're facing now is that with renewables, we are unable to connect them the way we should connect in the grid, and that causes some sort of confusion. And I think the issue was addressed to say that maybe we moved slightly too fast on the transition and left some of the infrastructure issues. And yes, the transformation of Eskom is meant to address that bit, and the minister was
It's a little bit technical, but South Africans do hear that renewables are trying to come on board. Sometimes that connection is an issue. Can you put it in simple language? Why?
Okay, so in simple language, when our electricity grid was developed, let's say some 100 years ago, it was based on coal, which is called base load, meaning that you don't have a lot of fluctuations in the amount of energy that's being pushed into the transmission grid. Now you've got solar. In the day, you pick up the level of energy, but at night, you don't have the same level of energy. And some days it's cold or there's no sun. The same with wind, you don't have the same amount of wind all the time. Now, the fluctuations in terms of the amount of energy that is pushed into the grid can lead into destabilization of the grid, and that's the problem that we're facing now. And part of unbundling of Eskom and taking transmission to a certain level is also to be able to raise funding, to be able to fund the changes that we need to make into our grid in order to accommodate renewables.
Well, that leads very well into my next question. South Africa is on this journey, the just transition, and we're part of BRICS. Does it have any bearing? Does it have any benefits for us to be part of BRICS as we embark on a process? Arguably, China, Russia, India, the big countries that are part of BRICS are still big emitters. So are they the ones that can walk with us?
Yes, it's very consequential that we are part of BRICS. And maybe what people may not appreciate is that the issue of just transition is not just a South African subject, it's an international subject. China itself, which is one of the biggest emitters, has been doing a lot to try and reduce their emission levels, also because of the high population. If you think about the cars there, all sorts of automobiles, the same as India. And these countries have done a lot over the years. Brazil, by the way, is also in that strata. These countries have done a lot over the years.
And we can learn from their mistakes, presumably.
Absolutely, we can learn from their mistakes, we can learn from their successes, If you look at India, for example, I think in 2026, they say they'll be the second largest producer of solar panels, because that's how they are using those solar panels to power their transition. And I think the lesson that we can learn in South Africa is to use the just transition process to also create some industries that become, opportune with the transition.
Well, you've highlighted something. We actually have a trade deficit with these countries. Maybe we'll land up importing the solar panels rather than doing it ourselves. We want to do things for ourselves and we want to export to these countries. We do have coal. Is that an opportunity while everybody is still using coal? And because of our logistical challenges, are we missing that opportunity?
Yes, we still have coal. And I mean, the minister, for example, was at pain to say that just transition should not and is not supposed to be just replacement of coal with renewables. If you look at coal, for example, you can have technologies that reduce the amount of emission. So that in itself is a transition, because the whole subject of transition is about reducing the amount of carbon footprint that we have as a country. So certainly coal is not lost, but of course we also want the other forms of energy. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be harvesting the sun. Africa is the place of the sun. But of course in South Africa we're having this challenge about the grid being able to take these fluctuating sources. But these are technological interventions that require some finance, and in time we'll get them right.
And BRICS, potentially, the new development bank, I mean, are there huge financing opportunities?
Yes, of course, the whole issue of BRICS, I mean, this is the 15th summit of BRICS, so BRICS is not a very old organization. The BRICS Bank came a long way, along the way, maybe some 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a journey that we need to undertake.
So it'll get there, basically. Not much disbursements at the moment, but it'll get there.
It will get there. I think what is key, I mean, for example, India being the biggest panels, I mean, the producer, maybe the idea is not for us producing panels, but us getting panels at favorable rates and also exchanging some of the products that we can send to India. And I think that is the economic cooperation that we're looking at from a BRICS point of view.
All right, yeah, hoping for preferential access or something like that. Finally, I mean, is it exciting in South Africa to be in the energy space? In a sense, Eskom's monopoly over the generation of power is being broken up. So that means market forces, different players can come in. Is it exciting, potentially?
Yes, that point came quite elaborately today, to say that South Africa has democratized the knowledge for power generation, and that's a great opportunity for the rest of the continent, where you know that the energy penetration is very low, and it will be great to see South African entrepreneurs using the knowledge that comes from this just transition process to move into other markets, into the continent, and start to help the continent to build at the same level that we might have. And that is obviously a great opportunity in terms of those countries industrializing. So in as much as people frown upon this whole process of just transition, there are great opportunities that comes with it.
As a speaker, and this really will be the last, did you take anything out? I mean, there were other speakers from China, from India. Anything that stood out for you today? Yes,
we learned a lot from what China especially did to reduce poverty, using the whole process of just transition, taking energy sources that will otherwise be constrained in certain areas, such as solar, for example. If you look at the South African example, in the Northern Cape, where initially the Northern Cape was never seen as a capital for energy. So those dividends, that came out a lot, and also the involvement of communities. You know, someone spoke about IPP, and someone came and said, let's have CPP, you know, community power producers, yes. You know, versus independent power producers. So a whole lot of takeaways, but certainly one of the points that I think is very important to mention was that South Africa, we seem to be not taking full advantage of this whole transition. We're losing focus. Opportunities are passing us, and you know, there's a call to say maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and start to look at this topic in a more favorable way, looking at new value chains, for example, that emanate from this whole thing of changing energy sources.
All right, so do it in a more thoughtful, intentional way.
And inclusive as well. I mean, we spoke about how municipalities, for example, are being left out in this discussion, yet municipalities, part of their funding models is generating income from electricity to cross-subsidize the other services. Now that part is not being spoken about. What is the implication of people putting solar panels in their roofs and don't buy from the municipalities? And this is not to say that must not be done, but we need to have a holistic discussion about this transition.
Yeah, that is one of the risks that is spoken about, what is going to happen to their revenue stream. Thank you so much for your time. One of the panelists talking about energy today here at Gallagher Estate, this all organised by government in conjunction with the BRICS Business Council. That was Alex Mabunda from NTIYISO Consulting Group, and we'll be back with more a little later.